Welcome to the Escape into Board Games podcast.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
And this is our escape from the real world where we talk about board games. In this episode, we talk about creepy board games for a scary night.
So please join us for the Escape into Board Games podcast. Sometimes we're looking for board games that explore creepy, scary, or horror themes to bring the family and friends around the table.
Some games have a mood that comes through when you play them. When the game tells a story that is a bit darker, full of ghosts, ghouls, and creepy old houses, playing that game and evoking that mood often seems more appropriate at night.
Whether it's your yearly spooky game night with friends or you just want to enjoy a creepy night in playing board games,
have a seat by the fire while we tell tales of creepy board games for a scary night.
Can board games be scary? Like, have you ever been scared playing a board game?
Personally, not for me.
No.
I've not encountered a game that is scary.
Creepy, sure.
Creepy, yeah.
Suspenseful.
Lots of atmosphere, yeah.
Even gory in places. I've read some gory descriptions in some games.
Yeah, but not scary. It's an interesting thing. Like, I don't really find even like horror movies very scary.
Oh, you're one of those.
I definitely have more memories of scary movies and scary books as a child.
Yeah.
Or even as a young man, but I don't really remember sort of a modern movie that provided, a scare or fear factor. Obviously, those jump scenes, where they come out and scare you. Yeah, I mean, those make you jump, but I don't find too many of them are scary. But yeah, I was just trying to think of like what's the scariest, modern movie and relating it to board games. And I was trying to think, and I really couldn't find one.
Yeah.
You haven't experienced the scared thing.
No. I mean, it's maybe in a Dungeons and Dragons kind of way when you're not really sure what's happening and they're telling the story. And right? It doesn't take much to scare somebody. You could do it really well with a flashlight around a campfire, right?
Right.
But you need a willing participants and you need a good storyteller. And you need that to be implemented by, it's not coming out of the box scary, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It takes the people in order to get that. But even then, there's no jump scares. There's none of that classic fright stuff. It's just not there.
Yeah, not yet anyway. There's a lot of horror movies that have been made into board games, or at least there's a few that I can think of. Like, there's that Jaws one. I mean, when I watched Jaws as a kid, as a young person, that movie scared me. Really scared me.
Yeah.
And I love the board game, but it's not scary. It's not scary. It's more fun. Yeah.
It evokes the movie very well, the theme very well. Mm-hmm. And it's relatively simple, but I enjoyed it a lot too. But yeah, it's not scary in that way, but I don't know. There is a bit to that. You're in the water. You don't know where the shark is.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it scary, but it's got that tension.
Mm-hmm. So we've got other games that we've talked about that could certainly have fit into this category.
That's right. Nemesis, Dead of Winter, Temple of Chalk.
Yeah.
All could have been in this episode. But those are featured on our Board Games Dripping with Theme episode.
Yeah. And I guess to a lesser extent, maybe Ghost Blitz. Ghost Blitz was in our Fantastic Fillers.
That's right.
It at least has a ghost in it.
That's right. Wouldn't call it scary, but it
can be scary if somebody's wearing a ring in the game. But without the fear or the scariness in board games, you can certainly get that mood. One of the things that we do when we play, most of the games that we play, I have like a soundtrack in the background. Yeah. So for, science fiction games, I'll have science fiction sounds in the background.
Yeah.
For comic book games, it's all the movie soundtracks and stuff like that. And for horror movies, that's really easy. You can find all kinds of, Halloween themed music to put on in the background. So that's always a good way to kind of set the mood in a game.
There's a website that offers this service called Mellow Dice.
Yes.
melodice.org, where you just punch in the name of the game you're playing and it'll curate a YouTube playlist of appropriate music for you.
Yeah, big shout out to Melodice. It's a great little website and hundreds of songs and music and hours of stuff to listen while you play.
Yeah, very cool.
This list could have been pretty long because there's a lot. It really could.
Yeah.
There's a long list of favorite horror-themed, scary board games out there.
Yeah. There's no shortage of games in this theme.
We've got enough content for the next couple of years of doing this episode.
For sure.
Lots of creepy board games for scary nights.
I like how this next game, we take a familiar theme and turn it on its head.
Yeah.
Instead of the Ghostbusters going in and capturing or exorcising the ghosts, it's the ghosts trying to scare away the ghost hunters.
Haunt the House. Haunt the House is a pressure luck, set collection, and bluffing ghosting game for 2 to 5 players ages 8 and up that plays in about an hour. Haunt the House was designed by Josh and Helena Capel in 2018 and is published by KTBG. Ghost hunters have dared to enter our haunted house? It shouldn't take too much to scare these fools away, and then we can collect their exploration gear as trophies. In Haunt the House, players are ghosts competing against each other to scare away a group of ghost hunters who have decided to explore the haunted house. Players have a small arsenal of tricks to scare away the ghost hunters, represented by icons on the cards in their hand. Things like
ghastly moaning,
a chill across the back of your neck,
creaking floorboards,
slamming doors, and items that suddenly and mysteriously fall and go bump. As the ghost hunters flee the house, grab their gear as trophies to prove that you're the most fearsome frightener.
This is fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
Where each of us get a little wooden icon, right? We're a little ghost.
Yeah.
And Egon Spengler's coming in with his ghost detector or whatever, and he just needs 2 creaks and a bump, and we're going to scare them away.
Those paranormal detectives are all going to get scared away. Each room in the house has a different ghost hunter, and each one requires a different set of icons to scare them away. On your turn, you can have a couple things that you can choose to do. You can play a scare card to one of the rooms in order to try and scare away one of those ghost hunters. You can play these cards face up or face down. If you play the card face up, it allows the other ghosts to see how close everyone is to scaring that ghost hunter away, but it also provides you with a special room power that can help you in other ways during the game.
Cool.
However, playing the card face down can help contribute to eventually scaring away the ghost hunter and earn you a reward if the icon on the card you played matches one of the things that scares them. Or you can add a different icon to the pile as a bluff to mess with the plans of your opponents.
So this is set collection, basically, right?
Yeah.
It's a public set collection. We're just trying to meet the criteria. Egon here needs 2 creaks and a bump.
Right.
And there's 1 card face down and 1 card face up. The face up card is a bump. So we assume the face down card is a creak, but it could be chills.
Yeah.
And then we're nowhere near close to solving that, right? Scaring him away. He's not scared of chills.
Yeah, you can bluff it and, that messes with your opponents. But, ideally you want to be contributing to these scares and scaring them away so that you can collect their cards as points.
Because even if you're not the one to scare them away,
yeah,
you will get a bonus if you have a match.
Yeah. And there's this sort of push your luck thing that's going on, because the other thing you can do on your turn is you can actually yell boo. This is, yeah, I know, you yell boo! and this is when all the face down cards are revealed.
Okay.
And the icons on them are revealed, and we see if there's enough scares of the correct icons to frighten out that ghost hunter. And then if you're the player who performed the boo action, if you're the one that yelled boo, then you will collect the ghost hunter's card that shows their fallen gear. And on there will be icons like things like a flashlight, a crowbar, maps, or a lantern. And you collect them as trophies, and they become points at the end of the game.
Okay.
Players that contributed cards with the correct icons on them will score victory points or get to draw from a new deck of cards called phantom cards that provide them with powers that they can use during the game.
Very cool. So it's entirely possible that you yell boo and there isn't the appropriate cards to scare away the ghost hunter.
Exactly.
You have to be really careful.
Yeah.
But you could also play cards from your hand to make up the difference.
Correct. Yes. So if you are short 2 of the bump icon, but you have 2 or more in your hand, then you can play them from your hand and you fulfilled the scare.
You're not wasting your boo.
Exactly.
Cool.
So it's a little bit of push your luck. It's a little bit of bluffing. It's a little bit of set collection. And at the end of the game, points are awarded for any skull tokens that you collected, which are victory points, and gear icons that you collected from scaring away the different ghost hunters. And each ghost hunter has a different set of icons, and the more of those icons that you collect, the more points you get.
Nice.
This game, for some reason, reminds me a lot of Broom Service.
Okay.
I don't know why. I love Broom Service.
Me too.
Broom Service, still one of my favorite games.
Yeah.
You and I have played it a lot.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great game. And I guess the idea that you can play your cards face up or face down is what makes it feel that way. Like in Broom Service, you're playing them bravely or cowardly.
Yeah.
They don't really have the same effect in Haunt the House, but for some reason that idea of, I'm going to bluff with some face down cards and I'm going to show my hand by playing some face up, it just makes it come to life.
Yeah, Broom Service is a really simple pick up and deliver game with this brave, cowardly action going on, simultaneous action selection.
Yeah.
And then this game is like a pretty simple set collection thing going on. But this, like you're saying, the face down area is really kind of adds a layer that keeps, because as you know, I'm not a fan of set collection games.
Yeah. You're not a fan of set collection, yes.
But this has got something else to it that keeps me keen.
Yeah, the bluffing, right?
Not even so much the bluffing. I mean, chances are the card that's face down is going to contribute to the scare, but you just don't know in which way. Is it going to be a chill? Is it going to be a boo? Is it going to be a creak? What am I going to need to add if that isn't the card I think it's going to be?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The other thing that adds to this game quite a bit is the room powers. So each room has this different power that you get to use when you play your card face up to the room.
Yeah.
Right? You're providing an icon. You're providing information to all your opponents. So now instead of 3 moaning icons, now we only need 2 to finish this one.
Yeah, we're halfway there, everybody.
Yeah, you're helping everybody. But you get this really powerful and what I think is exciting or satisfying power that lets you do things like you can take cards that were discarded from the discard pile. Oh. You can draw more scare cards. One of the rooms lets you peek at a face down card in any of the other rooms. So now you've got this hidden information that no one else has about how many icons are needed to accomplish this or that room.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. The components in the game are fantastic. They come with these sort of different wooden meeple ghosts. Mm-hmm. They're in these fun shapes and colors. And actually, the meeples themselves serve very little purpose in the game, but it just adds quite a bit. Like they're cool looking and it's kind of like gives you something to focus on while you're planning your moves. The VB tokens are these great skull-shaped cardboard tokens, and both the wooden meeples and the cardboard skull tokens actually, they glow in the dark.
No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Each player's cards, the bumps, chills, moans, and creaks, have a background color so you know whose card belongs to who. But in addition to the color, they also have added a texture, like wallpaper, which I believe will help colorblind players, but it's also a nice detail.
Yes, it's like the room of the haunted house.
Yeah.
There is a bit of a memory component to the game as well, because you want to keep track of what cards have been played by your opponents, because everyone has the same deck of cards.
Yeah.
So there's, 3 of this icon, and Matt's already played all 3 of those. So when he says he's contributing to this room, he's probably not.
Yeah, he doesn't have any chills to contribute. What is he talking about?
Yeah. It's not an important part of the game, but there is some of that for young kids to pay attention to.
This is one of those games that can play very differently depending on who you're playing with.
Yes.
Some players might be very methodical and careful about, before saying boo.
Right.
While other players may press their luck a bit further, yell boo more often, or lay more garbage cards as bluffing.
Right. Yes, it's true. I would say Haunt a House, because of its theme, it's probably one that gets played a lot more in October and then put away until next season.
Yeah.
But it comes with a ton of different rooms and ghost hunting cards and phantom cards. So there's actually quite a bit of replayability in Haunt a House. Yeah, you can play this quite often, and it feels quite different every time. And like you said, who you play with matters a lot too.
Yeah.
The other thing is there's a lot of different ways to earn points. So, there's a luck factor with any kind of card game. But because there are these different ways to score points, that's controlled a little bit in this game.
Okay.
It's surprising. Like if you thought of this as kind of a light and fluffy sort of, family game, it certainly is. But there's a surprising amount of depth in it as well, and a lot more player interaction. Like you're reading each other a lot more than you might expect from just kind of looking at the game from the outside.
Right. And so it's not really like a kid's game, right? Like when they say 8 and up, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, they can manage, but.
Yeah. I think it's one that it's geared towards families. Kids will enjoy it. But adults and people with no kids who are hardcore gamers or whatever you want to call them, there's something in this game that they will enjoy as well. It's a good game.
Nice. But Haunt the House isn't very scary, is it? I mean, it's great theme-wise, but it's not like, it's nothing, not creepy, not...
No, it's not scary, but none of the games are scary.
But you know how you said earlier, books can be scary. You can be sitting there, reading a good book like Stephen King, Pet Sematary, and it's literally terrifying. Like it is scary.
Yeah.
And so simple text can be scary. But I find that if you were to read that same book out loud to like a small group of people, it would kind of lose its effectiveness, right? Like it would lose its, if you just put it in, if it's all in your head, it's all self-contained. The magic circle is just you and the book.
Yeah.
Right. But once you start to read that at a table of 3 other people, you realize, well, Chris has got a wife and he's got a job and we're not really in the apocalypse right now. I'm just reading from the book. And it right? It's just like all that melds together and all these real life things seep in and they just become less effective.
Yeah. And you get caught up in the nuance of the person's speech and the words that they're saying and the other noises in the room and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And it depends on how it's read and how committed everybody is to the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But if everybody is really committed to the experience and they really want terrific flavor text and they want that classic horror literature experience in a board game. Eldritch Horror. Eldritch Horror is a cooperative dice-rolling action point Lovecraftian nightmare for 1 to 8 players, ages 14 and up, that plays in 2 to 3 hours. Eldritch Horror was designed by Corey Kanichka and Nikki Valens and published by Fantasy Flight Games in 2013. It is the early 1920s and an ancient evil has begun to awaken in a distant part of the globe. You and a group of eccentric investigators appear to have been reluctantly recruited into a gothic supernatural war against a being of unimaginable power that predates time itself.
I love it. That's good.
Eldritch Horror is a completely cooperative board game where players are traveling the globe trying to prevent an ancient Lovecraftian evil from awakening and destroying all of humanity. They must work together to solve mysteries. Each ancient one comes with its own mystery deck, and players must solve 3 of these cards to win the game. When you're sitting in front of a completely set up game of Eldritch Horror, you'll have the map of the globe in front of you with various locations of interest like London, England, San Francisco, Tokyo, Shanghai, the pyramids, the heart of Africa, or Antarctica. And there's train routes or shipping routes to get you to and from these various locations. There'll be piles of tokens for keeping track of threats and clues, and hit points and sanity. The hit points are tracked with little red heart tokens, and your sanity is tracked with blue brains. There will be stacks of various cards around the board for different locations and events, and in front of each player will be a character sheet with stats and flavor text. Each character will have a special action or special ability, and their skills in lore, influence, observation, strength, and will all be different, varying between usually 2 and 4. The number represents the number of dice you get to roll in a challenge or test. So Tony Morgan, the bounty hunter, will have high stats in observation and strength, where Charles Kane, the politician, will have high stats in influence. Each player collects a number of heart and brain tokens equal to that player's health and sanity.
I've never played Eldritch Horror, but this idea that you have sort of a health statistics and you've got a sanity statistic, that's pretty common in these Fantasy Flight Cthulhu-themed games like Arkham Horror, and is it Call to Cthulhu, the card game, I think is one of them.
Yeah. Mansions of Madness.
Yeah, so that sort of thing, the idea that you can lose your health or you can actually lose your sanity.
That's right.
That's pretty common in these games. And in the stories themselves, it stays true that way.
Yeah. In addition to these piles of tokens and stacks of decks everywhere, you will also have chosen an Ancient One at the start of the game. The base game comes with 4 Ancient Ones to choose from, but the one everyone is most familiar with is Cthulhu. This oversized Ancient One card will have some art depicting the hideous monster, some flavor text, setup instructions for the game, as well as instructions on how to construct the Mythos deck, and some ongoing rules that will be applied throughout the game. Each Ancient One has its own unique deck of mystery cards, its own unique research encounter cards, and sometimes your Ancient One will even come with its own encounter cards. Because this game relies so heavily on theme and story and flavor text, this extra content for replayability is incredibly important, as you don't so much want similar components kind of remixed randomly in a new way, but rather you want a completely unique experience every time you sit down to play this game.
Right.
For anyone who's ever played Pandemic, you might find some similarities with this game. It's almost as if Pandemic had a baby with Dungeons and Dragons. Players are traveling around the globe, trying to put out fires and mitigating evils while staying one step ahead of the ever-growing threats. But fans of Pandemic should know before going in that Eldritch Horror is Pandemic's evil, bigger brother.
Very good.
It's punishing and hard. Throughout the arc of the game, things get more and more increasingly bad, instead of getting gradually better. If a player dies in this game, they drop all their belongings, lose all their stats, and then they grab a new character from the box and start again. It's not an automatic loss. You have to grind through this thing either till the Ancient One is vanquished or they awaken and destroy all of humanity.
I like that there's some real consequences to this game. Your character can die. And it's like a story that, that character died, but someone else, somewhere else in the world, picked up the mantle to fight Cthulhu or his Ancient Ones just as quickly and took up the banner and continued the fight. Yeah.
The only time I've won this game was a 4-player game, and one of our players died, lost everything, all their important gear in Australia, and started again. And we eked out a win. I'm not sure how, but yeah, he was lost.
Huh.
Eldritch Horror is played over 3 phases until the endgame conditions are triggered. In the first phase, the action phase, players travel around the map, trying to get to different locations where crises are happening or where they can upgrade their character stats. Players can get tickets to travel on trains or boats, and if they share a space with another player, they can trade possessions. In the second phase, the encounter phase, players interact with locations that they've landed on by either pulling a location card or resolving an encounter token. If players travel to San Francisco, for example, they can improve their observation skills. Or if they travel to London, they can spawn clue tokens, which are good to fight against the various threats. And if they travel to Buenos Aires, they can gain ritual spells. So let's say a player goes to London. They pull from the orange deck, and on that card will have text for if you're in London or if you're in Rome, if you're in Istanbul. So you read the London text.
The famous author Agatha Christie has disappeared. You suspect cult involvement and look into the case. If you pass, you find messages sent to the author from another world. Spawn 1 clue token on each space containing a gate. If you fail, your investigation runs cold and lose 1 sanity.
Clue tokens are a sort of currency in the game, where players have to gather a certain number of them in order to mitigate certain evils. So if in order for you to succeed at the Agatha Christie challenge, you need to roll your dice and see if you pass the observation test. So depending on what your observation stats were at, that's how many dice you would grab.
Right.
You need to have 1 success. That's either a 5 or a 6.
Okay.
So hopefully you're rolling 3 or 4 dice, in which case you're going to get a success. If you're rolling 1 or 2 dice,
it's less likely.
Yeah, because each dice is a 1 in 3 chance.
Right.
There are few limits to the horrors that await you in this game. Perhaps a gate opens up, a portal to an otherworldly dimension. Players would need to travel to the gate's location and resolve an otherworld card.
The Abyss. The night gaunts seem intent on keeping you here in the darkness. You do your best to continue climbing out of these terrible depths without alerting them to your presence. Observation skill check. Should you fail, the night gaunts pick you up and toss you back to the bottom of the abyss.
There are monsters in Eldritch Horror. They're not standees or sculpts, but rather tokens with some art on one side and what they do, their stats, on the other. Things like warlocks, cultists, zombies, werewolves, witches, and wraiths. Each of these monsters will attack your body or your mind, inflicting pain or insanity. These monsters will block locations and need to be defeated in order to access certain parts of the map.
I can't get to the gate in Sydney because the Dark Young has 5 hit points.
Phase 3 is where the bad stuff happens. This is the Mythos phase. You start the Mythos phase by drawing a card from the Mythos deck. Remember, the Mythos deck has been constructed very specifically, depending on your ancient one, and it's likely stacked to get slowly worse as the game goes on. It's during this phase when gates will open, monsters will surge, and the ancient one will have a mechanism or timer or story that will progress. There's more than one manner of horrible thing. Which horrible things are activated on which card are decided by a row of icons. My favorite of these mechanisms has to be the Reckoning. When you see the little red lightning bolt symbol, then you have to affect all the cards and tokens on the table that have that symbol. For example, the werewolf will lunge forward and attack an investigator, or Cthulhu will spread influence across the board, but a lot of the status cards will have reckoning symbols on them.
Okay.
If on a previous adventure you had been poisoned or suffered amnesia, or if you had to take out a loan to get out of jail,
okay,
and you had a debt card, all of these cards will be affected by the reckoning.
Cool.
For example, you could have entered a deal with a demon and acquired a Dark Pact.
Okay.
There are several Dark Pact cards in the deck.
Right.
And they're all the same on the front, but if the demon comes to collect and you fail your roll, you will have to flip that card over and reveal likely unique flavor text and a challenge you've never seen before.
That is cool.
That is cool, because you don't know what it's going to be. Like, it could just be like, some little...
You don't know what the consequences are.
Yeah, you don't know what the consequences are.
Yeah.
They all look the same. And the deck is just filled with all of these. You could, like, your broken leg could become infected. Right? Or you could be healed. You don't know, right? You don't flip that card over until they tell you to. And I just love that, like, ticking time bomb that's sitting on the table that entire time.
Right.
I had to get out of jail. I wasn't going to spend the rest of the game in jail, but now I'm in debt and I don't know, who did I borrow money from? I got to pay this off before the next reckoning comes out.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's fun. In addition to the many things that can happen on a Mythos card with those icons, there's always an ongoing condition or event that takes place. Rumors are an ongoing event that go on the board with a rumor token and must be investigated and solved. Events could be anything from putting monsters on the board or advancing the doom track, forcing players to discard items, etc.
Okay.
Eldritch Horror is a deep dive. There is a lot of content to explore, and it can be quite punishing and take some time. And sometimes it feels a little random.
Oh, really? I've not heard people say that it feels random, but I see what you're saying. Like the idea that,
There's dice. There's dice. Each of these challenges, when you go to those locations, you try to close the gate or you try to upgrade, you will get that. Do an observation roll, do a strength test, do a lore test, and you take the dice that you're allowed to roll, and you have to get a success, otherwise you fail.
Right.
And with all that dice rolling, you're going to get a bad roll every once in a while, and it's going to hurt, right?
Right.
And so
because it is punishing.
Yeah. And obviously you're trying to mitigate that by upgrading each character. It's very much like Dungeons and Dragons in that you're trying to upgrade your stats so that future rolls you'll get more successes and be able to succeed. But it just never seems to be enough. Like it just seems like the dice are going to be against you no matter what.
Would you describe Eldritch Horror as a complex game?
It isn't a particularly heavy game, but there are some significant cognitive load in that there are so many moving pieces to keep track of.
Okay.
The ebb and flow of the game, the upkeep during the mythos phase, they're all very straightforward. And there's guides in the back of the rule book and player aids for everybody, and it's easy to follow the flow of the game.
Okay.
But conditions change throughout the game. Players will gain statuses and bonuses and items and increase their characters' abilities, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of it all. Like when I said the reckoning comes, it affects every card and token on the board.
Right.
Well, sometimes you spend a few minutes just finding all the reckoning symbols that need to be affected because they can be on any surface. Oh, right. I made that deal with Satan.
Right. I hate it when that happens. Right. I see that. So it's not complex to play, but it is complex to sort of keep all the balls in the air and pay attention to all the different options and things that are moving in this game. Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels like it kind of adds, like if you're into it, right? And we're going back to the magic circle again. Like if every player is committed at the table to that, we're not all reaching for our phones or talking about the game last night or what do you think of that TV show? And we're all in the moment. Well, then it's a lot easier. It seems to be more immersive in that way. It's like it takes all of your observation and all of your keen intellect in order to just manage what needs to be done. But it's not hard. It's flow is what it is. It's flow. There's enough going on that you need to keep thinking about it, and it keeps you engaged the entire game. I feel this adds to the immersiveness because it's not the kind of game where you're going to be pulling out your phone when it's not your turn.
Right.
Everyone reads the flavor text on all the cards out loud. It's engrossing.
It's the story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like, a Lovecraftian Dungeons and Dragons that doesn't need a dungeon master.
Yeah, it sounds very much like a role-playing game. Like the theme and the story are important in so many ways. Yeah. And there's a lot of dice rolling, it sounds like, in the game as well.
There's a lot of dice rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does sound like a role-playing game in a lot of ways. A tabletop board game version of a role-playing game.
Setup of this game is a beast. There are a lot of different modules that need to come in and out depending on which ancient one you're playing with or the player count. It's not difficult, but it's time consuming.
Yeah, that's pretty common for those Fantasy Flight games, right?
Yeah.
17 decks of cards and 4,000 different tokens that need to be used. And yeah.
It's always been worth it.
Yeah.
The recommended player count for me, I would recommend 3 or 4.
Really?
Dedicated players. Like Pandemic, this game, it's incredibly difficult with just 2 players. Like you just can't get to all the different locations on the map. You're not spread out enough.
Right.
So with more players, it feels more balanced. And even at 4 players, it didn't feel as though there was a lot of downtime between turns.
Cool. Well, you've convinced me.
Nice.
Eldritch Horror, the theme is so important in that game. So that really appeals to me. It's one that I've missed out on playing, and I think I need to add that to my must playlist.
Yeah, we'll get it to the table.
And the theme is really what gets me.
Yeah.
I wasn't thrilled with Arkham Horror, but Eldritch Horror, I think, is a better version, and
a little more attainable, might be.
Yeah, attainable.
Yeah,
and I like the theme of the world stage rather than just a town.
Just a town. Yeah. Agreed.
And on the subject of theme does matter. It matters to me.
I think one could argue that there is no more thematic game than the next game you're going to present. Like, it can't get any more thematic than the next one.
When you lean so heavily on these established horror-themed tropes and characters, it's going to work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you cram so many classic horror monsters into a single box.
Horrified. Horrified is a cooperative pick-up-and-deliver classic movie monsters horror game for 1 to 5 players ages 10 and up that plays in about an hour. Horrified was designed by Prospero Hall and published by Ravensburger in 2019. The classic monsters from Universal Studios.
Dracula.
Frankenstein.
The Bride.
The Mummy.
The Invisible Man.
The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
The Wolfman.
Have invaded a small town, and it's your job to work with your team to find the different items you will need scattered around the town to defeat them. You'll need to tailor your approach and work together to rid the town of all the monsters. But beware, every monster has a different way to be defeated. The characters you play in the game come straight from the screen in many of the classic horror movies of the time. These include the inspector, the mayor, the scientist, and the archaeologist, amongst others. Players are moving around the board to the different locations in the town, collecting item tokens that come in 3 different colors, representing physical items,
shovel, pitchfork, silver cane, or fireplace poker.
Intellectual items,
fossil, a textbook on anatomy, a centrifuge, or a cosmic ray diffuser.
And spiritual items,
a cross, wolfsbane, garlic, or a wooden stake.
During the game, several of the monsters are moving around the town, overcoming villagers, fighting players in the game, and generally making it difficult for players to accomplish their goal. Players can escort villagers around the town, trying to help them to get to their safe location. If you end up helping a villager to safety, you will get a special perk card that will help you during the game. But if one of the monsters attacks and defeats a villager, the town's terror level will increase.
Okay.
In Horrified, each monster has their own little mini-game that players need to accomplish, as well as a different list of required item tokens needed to defeat them. However, these usually involve bringing the required items to the monster's location or their secret lair. For example, for the Creature from the Black Lagoon, players need to discard item tokens to start an expedition to find the creature's hidden lair and then discard more tokens to finally defeat him.
I really like the way that each of these monsters feels different, has a little mini game.
Yeah.
It's usually a pick up and deliver kind of thing, but each one is different and unique.
Yeah. And they match the theme. If you're familiar with those classic movie monsters, you've got to find Dracula's coffin.
That's right.
And make sure he's in it. And you've got to have a stake to run it through his heart and all these things.
Yeah.
So thematically, the tokens and what you're doing makes sense too.
It's great.
At this point, we don't want to explain more about what's involved with those mini games for each monster is. Because for me, part of the fun is actually discovering the different things that you have to do to defeat each monster during the game.
Yeah. You know, you'd play a game with the Mummy and with Dracula and you'd figure those out and then, right, get all that. And then the next game, you'd bring out a new monster and it's like a brand new game. Now we're fighting the Creature from the Black Lagoon. What? What's he got? What's his deal?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a fresh little, I agree. We're not going to spoil that for anybody.
Cool. Yeah. And each monster has like a difficulty level on them. So it'll tell you like this is a medium, that's a hard. And you can actually combine them. In fact, you're suggested to combine them so that you're facing 2 or 3 or 4 monsters at the same time during the same game. I think 4 would be really hard.
Yeah, I would think so.
We've done it with 2 and 3, and it's hard to win as it is.
Agreed. Yeah.
But at the beginning of the game, you decide on how many and which monsters you will face in the game.
Okay.
And the way that those abilities interact and the things that you have to do to solve those mini games, the way they interact with each other,
right,
it really adds to the difficulty of the game.
Right.
You might have 2 monsters that require a lot of red tokens. So now red becomes really, really valuable in your game because 2 of your 3 monsters require red tokens. So you have to really use them efficiently.
Yeah, the mummy was easily defeated the last game, but now that we've got the creature of the Black Lagoon in this game as well, and that's really hard to defeat the mummy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Monster movement is determined by playing cards from the monster cards deck. This tells you which monsters to move.
Right.
When combat occurs between players and monsters, is determined by some simple dice rolling.
Okay.
There's no player elimination in Horrified. However, if your player is injured in battle with one of the monsters, you will be required to discard an item token, making it harder to defeat all the remaining monsters. And if you don't have any item tokens to lose, then you'll start your next turn at the town hospital, and the town's terror level will increase because the hero has been injured in a battle with one of the... Those kinds of rumors spread through town quickly.
Morale goes down.
Yes. Players win if they defeat all the monsters terrorizing the town before either the monster card deck runs out or the town's terror level reaches its maximum.
Cool.
I've been a lifelong fan of these old monster movies from the 30s and 40s. When I heard this game was coming out, it was like insta-buy. I didn't need to play it. I didn't need to know much more about it. I'm buying that. I was super excited, and I've been loving it and not been disappointed in the slightest since we've gotten it.
How many plays have you got in, do you think?
I'd say about a half dozen or so, not a ton.
Yeah. And have you won yet?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've won a couple times.
Nice.
And we've still got a monster that we've been kind of holding back. We haven't played with Frankenstein and the Bride. I think that's probably going to come this month, that we've been sort of holding on to as, no, let's not play them yet. Let's not play them yet.
That's awesome.
Horrified has quickly become, if not my favorite, one of my top 2 or 3 favorite cooperative games.
Wow.
I absolutely love Horrified. It's shot up in terms of what it does for me. We're often laughing during the game because you feel like you're in one of those old campy movies. You're fighting Dracula, and then you end up laughing when you collect the red token, which is holy water. And of course, that was the one that was located at the church. So it's perfect. Like it always, it comes together and it just makes you laugh. It's a super easy game to teach. Very, very, very family-friendly rules. And because the monsters in the game, they're pop icons in our culture. I mean, you can't mention Frankenstein or Dracula or the Wolfman to anyone of just about any age, and they don't know about it.
Yeah.
The game itself is going to appeal to this really, really wide range of people. And all of that makes this, a very easy game to get to the table as often as you want. Definitely one that you want in your collection. In terms of gameplay, the need for efficiency of your actions, teamwork, and solving of the puzzles of each monster make the game difficult to win. It's not easy to win. Mm-hmm. It sounds like Eldritch Horror might be quite a bit harder, but this is not an easy game either.
Okay.
And there's even ways to make it harder. I think, like I said, you can add 4 or more monsters to the board, although that seems nearly impossible, I think.
Sure.
But it's possible, I guess. There are only 30 monster cards in the deck, and you draw a new one after every turn. So everybody has a turn, and then you're drawing this monster deck. That's not a lot of time for players to move around the board, collect a whole bunch of icons, move around the board again, and, defeat these monsters with, the luck of some die rolls in there too.
Yeah, we're not getting it all done.
Yeah, it's a fast game. It plays along very fast. There is downtime, but it's not terribly long when it's not your turn.
This game has that thing where when your teammates are doing their turn, you're engaged in what they're doing. Right? You're always encouraging their challenges and their missions that they're trying to get accomplished, and you're invested in their turn. And so I find that the downtime is like zero because you're just in it the entire time.
I think part of that's the theme, right? The idea that this is Dracula that's chasing your buddy in the other part of town. It's like, oh no, he's really going to get you. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. He moved and he got you.
I wouldn't say all cooperative games have this, but this one certainly does, in that we're all invested in the common goal.
Mm-hmm. And we've always found that games are very close. Like it always comes down to just like, oh, if we had one more turn or 3 more turns, we would have won for sure. That kind of thing. It's very close and exciting.
Agreed.
If you like the old monster movies from Universal Studios, or you just really love Halloween, Horrified is a game that you really, really need to get your fangs into. Like Pandemic or Catan before it, I feel like in 10 years or so, this is the game that a lot of people are going to be saying got them into the hobby.
Oh, wow.
Horrified is the game that got them into the hobby.
Wow.
That's my hot take.
Nice. We're going to get back to the show after a brief message. This next ad is for Chris's own company, Geeky Goodies. If you'd like to hear what an ad for your game, product, or website might sound like, drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. When we escape into board games, we're always wearing our Geeky Goodies t-shirts.
They are great conversation starters for gamers and non-gamers.
But did you know that they also sell masks, socks, hoodies, game room posters, mugs, and so much more?
All things board games.
All things geeky.
Visit geekygoodies.com and use coupon code ESCAPE for a 10% discount off your purchase.
Have you played a lot of Jenga, Chris?
You know, I haven't. I've played a lot of modern Jenga-like games. I'm a sucker for a good dexterity stacking tower building game.
Junk art.
Junk art is one for sure.
Yeah.
It's probably the best of them.
Men at Work.
Yeah, I love those kinds of games.
Yeah.
They provide that tension, right? Like that,
Yeah.
you know, oh no, I've just got to do this just right. I remember my niece, I had one of those games. I can't remember what it's called, but it was a cowboy, and you were adding all his gear onto the cowboy.
Okay.
Like a saddlebag and a pickaxe and a shovel and stuff. And at some point, the horse came alive and started kicking and everything flew off him. And I thought it would be exciting to play this game that's going to shake and make a noise and knock everything. She got scared of it. I played it with her too young. She was 4. She was like, oh, put it away. So we put it in a box, and I still don't know if they've ever played it again. So maybe board games can be scary. Depends on your age.
Now, I am really bad at the dexterity stacking. Like Men at Work is the worst game for me because my hands are just like, la, la, la. Just like, I can't do it. But Jenga is a little bit more my speed, or maybe giant Jenga. Have you played giant Jenga, Chris, where you take 3 2x4s and cut them into like a life-sized, right?
No.
I've got a friend that has done this, and you can find instructions online where you can get 2 3x8s, or you can also do it with 2x4s, and you cut them in a certain way, and so they have the same proportions as Jenga blocks, and then you can build a big tower in the backyard with these Jenga. And it's a very simple game, but I'm a fan of the Jenga.
Yeah.
But I'm a bigger fan of the bigger Jenga because you've got that giant tower. It could topple. If you're not paying attention, it's going to hurt you if it falls.
It's going to hurt. Yeah.
It's not comfortable. The bigger the Jenga tower, the bigger the anxiety.
And the full contact sport it becomes.
Have you heard of the role-playing game Dread that uses a Jenga tower?
No.
It's a horror role-playing game. And I don't know much about it. It's demoed on Will Wheaton's tabletop.
Oh, okay.
But each time a player is doing a skill check in that game, you have to pull and place a Jenga block.
Okay.
But depending on the difficulty of that check, the dungeon master is going to dictate which block you pull. If the tower falls down, your character dies.
Interesting.
And I find that that's a really neat way to inject that tension into a game.
Well, that's interesting how, that dexterity mechanism from Jenga is used in other games.
To inject, that tension that wouldn't normally be there otherwise.
Yeah, and keeping with the theme of the show, a little bit of fear.
A little bit of fear. Flick 'em Up, Dead of Winter. Flick 'em Up, Dead of Winter is a cooperative, flicking, zombie hunting dexterity game for 1 to 10 players, ages 10 and up, that plays in about an hour. Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter was designed by Gaëtan Beaugenon, Jonathan Gilmore, Jean-Yves Bonpertuis, and Isaac Vega, and published by Pretzel Games in 2017. The world is no longer how we once knew it. After the apocalypse, all that is left are hordes of zombies across a sprawling wasteland. You and your fellow survivors are hiding in a small town where you hope to find food, supplies, and weapons. It's a bleak future, but the only way forward is one day at a time. And by flicking your finger. In our Dripping with Theme episode, we talked about a game called Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game. This game is a mashup of that game and the Western-themed flicking game, Flick 'em Up.
Right.
Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter is a dexterity game where you flick a disc to move your player around a small cardboard town that you've constructed on the table. This game immediately has something that no other game has.
Yeah.
That little miniature cardboard town. You push the chairs aside or you tuck them really close to the table.
Right.
Because you're not going to be sitting, right? You're standing above this little miniature town. You've set up the bank over here and you've got the hospital and the broken down van is over here and you've got some barrels.
A school or a police station is another building. Yeah.
Right. And it's just... You take a few minutes to construct this town on the table. Each scenario has got a particular layout, like where the initial zombies are, where your initial guys are, where the buildings are, right? And you get the map out and you just lay it out all on the table.
Right.
If you have a really big table, you can spread it all out. And so you're doing big flicks in order to get from the bank to the hospital.
Right.
But if you're a really small table, you can squish it all together. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
It does change the difficulty of the game, right? The same number of zombies in a smaller location. It's going to make it a tighter, more deadly game.
Right.
But if everything's really spread out, it's going to take a lot more flicks in order for you to get from place to place. They do recommend everything's, fit within a certain 3x3 or whatever, but there's some wiggle room.
Yeah. And it looks like a little town when it's all done. It's not a 3D building, but it's the building face of the school and the police department and the bank.
Yeah, it's just a little 2D cardboard thing. And if you were able to scooch your little disc in between the door, then you can go inside that building.
Yeah.
But it's just exactly right. It's just the facade, the front of it.
Yeah. And it looks great when it's all set up. It looks fun.
Yeah. The game comes with both cooperative and competitive scenarios. In the competitive scenarios, all the players would break up into two teams. In the cooperative scenarios, everybody is working together to accomplish the common goal. In either case, all players will be fighting off the zombies. Cooperative scenarios will have players collecting fuel or food and or weapons in order to make their escape. Or maybe they have to escort a wounded character to the hospital. The competitive scenarios will be similar, but there won't be enough resources for both teams, so it will be a race or even combat between teams. Moving and fighting in this game is all done with flicking.
Like Crocono or Pitch Car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Movement has a special large movement disc similar to Crocono, and shooting a gun is a smaller disc. You can even flick little knives and baseball bats, which are great because they don't make any noise. If anyone's ever played a zombie game, you know that you don't want to make any noise.
Right.
I like the baseball bat.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's got it's shaped like a baseball bat. You're supposed to flick it at one end and it kind of like spins as it makes its way to the zombies. And if you hit a zombie with a baseball bat, it doesn't make any noise. It doesn't alert other zombies to them. All you got to do is knock them down.
And I like the shotgun. The shotgun has these kind of 3 small bullets.
That's right.
That you're flicking all at the same time and you're trying to make them hit.
You kind of cram them into this little stencil that you get to place in front of your meeple.
Yeah.
And it holds all the little bullets in place. And you just kind of scooch them all up. And then when you shoot, they all scatter out.
Yeah. I think that's neat. I love that mechanic.
There's also a rifle, which uses a stencil as well. So kind of like a ruler. It keeps your bullets going nice and straight. It's got a nice big chunky bullet that you can put in there, and it fits into the stencil nice and snug. And so when you shoot it out, it goes nice and straight.
Makes it go a little bit more to the target, right? Which is thematic to what it is.
That's right. Yeah, a little bit more accurate, and you can get it a little bit further. It's terrific fun to take these zombies out. You want to do the knife and the baseball bat because you don't want to make any noise. Because when you make noise, the zombies come. And how the game does this in a cooperative way, right? Because we're all playing against the game. How are the zombies going to move against us? It's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. They've supplied this dice tower, which kind of looks like a big dumpster. It's very fitting. It fits into the landscape quite well. You don't even notice it's there.
It looks like another sort of building that's sort of in the side of town where the dump is or something like that. Yeah.
And so you place this dice tower where the noise took place, where the event that triggered the zombies. Place this dice tower down, and it's got a little trap door on top. And you take the number of zombies that you're supposed to be placing, and you place them. Each of the zombies are numbered, and the trap door on the top of the dice tower has numbers on it. Because easily you could understand, if I put the zombie over on this side of the dice tower and let him go, he's going to go off to the right. But if I put him over here, he's going to go off to the left. But that's not a choice players get to make. The numbers of the zombies you're pulling out dictate where they go onto this dice tower, and they will decide where they tumble out. But the dice tower has got it's got all that bumps and stuff inside. So when it does eventually eject those zombies out onto the board, you don't know where they're going. It's just like chaos.
Yeah. And they're like zombie meeples, right?
That's right. Yeah, everybody's like a little plastic meatball.
So they actually go in the dice tower and fall out.
You stack them on top.
Yeah.
You let the trapdoor go, and all these guys tumble out, and they like somersault down the dice tower and sometimes roll across the board. If they knock your character over, they're going to get a damage. They're going to get hit.
Right. They got bit or...
Yeah. Gathering food and weapons and fuel requires you to go into a building. And sometimes there's zombies inside those buildings. And so when there's a zombie, a fight will take place. And you kind of set that up on a separate board. It's kind of neat, like a little, dun, 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 the zombies coming. What happens is you set them up across it from each other, and you get your knife or your gun or whatever, and you start to shoot the zombie. If you miss, then they draw cards. And those cards will dictate how quickly, how far they get to you, and they're just lumbering towards you, and you're like, shooting them or throwing your knives at them and trying to take them out before they take out you.
Yeah, this part's kind of like one of those shootouts at sundown, you know what I mean? Like in those old Western movies where one person and another person face off against each other, except in this case, one of those people have a weapon, and the other person's just a zombie that's walking closer and closer and closer.
Those that have played the original Flick 'em Up will recognize this is exactly that. Whenever two players enter a building together, they do a shootout, a duel to each other. And when the duel, if each fires a bullet and each miss, then you move the meeples closer together and try again. Well, this is a very similar thing, except the zombie is just lumbering slowly forward, and you have to take him out.
Yeah.
So then when you're finally in the building by yourself, you can take an action to pick up a token. Sometimes when you pick up a token, you're hoping it's food or fuel, but it could be nothing. Or it could be a crossroads card. The crossroads card in this game work differently than the original Dead of Winter, but when you have to pull a crossroads card, you do what it says. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
Okay.
When it's a player's turn, they don't control a particular individual or meeple on the board, but rather activate a meeple on their team. And once that meeple has been activated, they turn their backpack upside down, indicating that character can't be activated again until the next round. This is important because when a character dies, players aren't eliminated. Their team just gets smaller.
Right. And that's very thematic for anybody that's ever watched a good zombie horde movie. The people just keep dying.
Yeah, people will die and you will lose characters, and that's just fine. Let's keep moving forward.
Have you played the original Flick 'em Up?
Yeah, I got both.
Yeah.
Personally, I preferred this one in that it is cooperative. It has the option to play completely cooperative. And with a flicking game, because of that dexterity element, I find that that's kind of like a random thing. It's so often you can do a flick that doesn't work out and it doesn't, right? And you're like, and it's just so much better when you're playing in a cooperative atmosphere because that flick will affect everybody equally and not just you. And right. And then everyone can relish or savor or
curse you. How could you miss that shot? Yeah.
Whereas the competitive one just seems a bit, I don't know, it seems a bit mean for the theme.
Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense.
We tend to play with a mulligan rule because so often you can biff that flick, or the entire game can hinge on one person doing one flick, which is both suspenseful, but it's also a lot of pressure for younger players. I have a large playmat, which makes this game a little better.
Yeah.
Because some tables have cracks or, seams that can interrupt a long flick.
Yep.
I would recommend playing under a playmat if you have the means.
I liked yours a lot. It worked perfectly. And it actually kind of adds to the look of the town a little bit, right?
That's right, yeah.
Depending on what your game mat theme is. But yeah, it works good. Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter. Yeah, that's a fun game. I had a good time playing that with you, and it's a good one.
Nice.
I like those dexterity games. You know that.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
You're crazy.
I'm not good at them. I just like them.
So we talked earlier about how board games can't be scary because they don't offer that jump scare, that surprise, that unsuspected event.
Right.
But I will offer that there is a game that can do that, but slowly.
Right. It may not still invoke fear, but it definitely adds a surprise.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a genuine surprise if it's you. Like, it's like, oh.
Yeah. You go into this game understanding one thing and then
something else completely surprising comes out. And it's not known to anyone at the table. If it's done right and you haven't played the game lots and lots of times.
Yeah.
No one at the table knows what's coming.
So it's probably the best example of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I would say so.
Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Betrayal at House on the Hill is a team-based dice-rolling haunted house exploring adventure game for 3 to 6 players ages 12 and up that plays in about an hour.
Betrayal at House on the Hill was designed by Bruce Glasgow, Rob Davio, Bill McQuillan, Mike Selinker, and Teowen Woodruff, and published by Avalon Hill in 2014.
You and a small group of intrepid investigators have decided to explore the creepy abandoned house on the top of the hill.
But before you will be able to escape, the house will consume one of you, turning them against the others. For there is always a betrayal at House on the Hill.
Players are paranormal investigators trying to find out what is going on inside a creepy old house. Players will change over the course of the game for better or worse, depending on how they deal with the house's surprises.
Each player card has stats for speed, might, knowledge, and sanity.
Cards, room tiles, and other game effects can make your character better and increase those stats, or hurt your character and decrease your stats.
On their turn, players will be moving around the house and discovering new rooms. Players will find items they can use in the house and can attempt to take special actions that involve using the die roll.
As players leave one room and enter another room, a new square room tile is drawn to reveal what the new room is and what happens in there.
When you first play the game, when it's first set up, the house is just the front foyer tile. It's this long piece.
Yeah.
It's 3 squares wide. It has the front door, the foyer, and the grand staircase at the end, which we'll use that to take to the second floor.
Yeah, and there's some doors that lead to sort of rooms that are on either end of the hall, or you can go up the stairs to take you to the second floor. And there's a different set of room tiles for the basement.
That's right.
For the main floor and for the upper floor.
Yeah, you go to draw a tile for the main floor and you pull a second floor tile. Well, you put that to the bottom of the deck and grab a different one.
Yeah, exactly. The different rooms that you discover in the house have different actions that you can take there. In the library, for example, you can gain the knowledge stat for your character.
In the chapel, you can gain sanity.
In the basement pentagram chamber, you might lose sanity.
Some rooms will reveal an event card or an item card that might provide you with an encounter right away, or maybe provide you with a powerful new item to use in the game. And some rooms will reveal an omen card, which are often a much more powerful item or tool that you can use in the game. But the more omen cards that your group has revealed, the more likely that you will be triggering the haunting.
At a certain point during the game, one player will trigger a haunting. This is where one player will be transformed and become the villain for the rest of the game. That player will spend the rest of the game trying to defeat all the other players who may need to fight to survive or may need to escape the house.
I'm really fond of this mechanism where, depending on which omen that you've pulled from the deck and which room you happen to be in when the haunt is triggered, will decide which haunt will happen. It's in a chart.
There's a chart at the beginning of the rule book, and it tells you which of the hauntings that happen. Once the haunt is triggered, the game changes dramatically and some of the rules change. The game becomes a struggle to win before your opponent does. The new traitor player will go into another room and carefully read through the traitor's tome. This is a special booklet that helps explain what has happened, how that player's new powers work, and what they must do to win the game.
The other players become heroes of the group, and they read the booklet called Secrets of Survival, learning what they need to do together to survive, and sometimes provide them with new special actions or some secret information that will help them get through the new challenges they face.
And this is another game that we can't really talk too much about, the specifics of what's going to happen, because we don't want to spoil someone else's experience listening to it.
Yeah.
It is important, though, that new traitor player actually leave the room.
That's right. Yeah.
They have to go away, go to the bathroom, go to the bedroom, and read their particular section, because the heroes have to talk out loud.
Yeah.
They have to read their part out loud so that everybody knows and understands it. And they have to strategize. They have to say, okay, here's what I think we should do, and da-da-da-da. And the new traitor player is kind of on their own that way. So they just have to kind of know what their powers are and what their new objective is.
That's right.
And there's some story with that too. Like there's some explanation as to, what's transpired, what transformation has happened and why, and what the motivation is for the new villain. It's quite good that way.
Combat is resolved by rolling dice, and damage can affect the different stats on your player card. Physical damage can affect your speed and might, and the mental damage can affect your sanity and knowledge.
There's the potential for player elimination in this game.
Yeah.
Once the haunt starts, it's possible for your character to die. If a hero player dies, they're out of the game. However, when this happens, it seems to be fairly late in the game, and the eliminated player doesn't usually have very long to wait before the game is completely over.
Yeah.
And, they can usually help with their team with cheering, moral support, and even advice along the way. I find usually that player is invested in the story by now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That they don't want to kind of get up and, go get drinks for everybody or go to the bathroom, and then come back when it's all over. They want to stay.
It's usually right at the end. It's just a few turns away from the end.
And they want to see, is it going to happen? Are they going to get away, or is the traitor going to win? The winner of the game is the first side, either the traitor player or the team of heroes, to accomplish their new hidden goals.
Chris, have you ever seen the movie Cabin in the Woods?
Yes.
This game feels like that movie.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
There are 50 different possibilities that could result that you'll experience at the end of the game. You don't know which one it is, but when you enter the game, it's you, your friends, a cabin on the hill.
And something bad happens.
Yeah. It could be zombies. It could be werewolves. It could be aliens. It could be ghosts.
Could be a portal.
Right? You don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, I experienced this game just before that movie came out, and it really felt like the makers of the movie were like, we need to make that board game into a movie.
Cool. I never thought of that. For me, the connection was always with the Scooby-Doo franchise, right? It was like, hey, Fred and Velma and Daphne are all going in this building, and then the door locks behind them and bad stuff ensues and they run around.
The clear, distinct difference is in every Scooby-Doo episode, the ghost is really just a guy in a suit.
Right.
But in this game,
Yes.
there are werewolves, there are vampires.
Yes.
You will be fighting off ghosts.
And one of you is going to struggle with that.
That's right. There's quite a bit of complaint online about how the different haunts are unbalanced. Like some haunts will make it incredibly difficult for the heroes to survive, while other haunts make it incredibly difficult for the traitor to win. And I would agree with that.
Sure.
These are valid complaints.
Yeah, I can see that.
But don't care.
Okay. The base game comes with 50 different haunts.
Yeah.
So unless you play this a lot, almost every time you play it is going to be a very different story and a very different unfolding of how that works. And not to mention, like, the way the actual house unfolds itself is all random, right?
That's right.
So the tiles will come up in different ways, and how I play this scenario as the traitor is going to be different than how you play it as the traitor. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's enough there that I think I can live with the imbalances.
Agreed. I don't go into this game with looking for a strategic, tactical, thinky game. I go in for the story, I go in for the theme, and I go in for the immersive experience.
It doesn't matter what side you end up on. If you become the monster and you turn into some creature, it's fun to, just run around and cause havoc in the haunted house. And if you're on the team of heroes, it's fun to just hack away at this evil thing, or to try to evade it as much as possible and run. It's a fun game. It captures that storytelling and excitement that I experienced as a young kid playing role-playing games. But it does this in, this great board game format.
Yeah. Tight.
There's no planning on part of a game master. It's this sort of role-playing game without a good dungeon master.
It comes right out of the box, ready to go.
Yeah. And there's even this Dungeons and Dragons version that I don't know much about, but it's called Betrayal at Baldur's Gate.
From what I've heard from reviews, there are more cooperative scenarios after the betrayal, and it's a little more balanced, but it's all fantasy theme, that Dungeons and Dragons universe that we're familiar with.
Right. I have to say I'm kind of tempted to own them because I like this game that much.
Yeah.
And we don't play it as much because the theme is sort of fall / October / Halloween.
Sure. So
we'll play it once or twice during the season and then put it away for another 12 months.
Yeah.
And when it's put away, I kind of miss it. So it'd be nice to have a Dungeons and Dragons version.
Agreed. Have you played any of the games that we've talked about today? What are some of your favorite creepy or scary games? Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to the Escape Into Board Games podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Escape Into Board Games. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps more people discover Escape Into Board Games, and you can get an Escape Into Board Games t-shirt at geekygoodies.com/escapeintoboardgames. Or you can help us fuel the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/escapeintoBGS.
This episode is produced by Matt McKenzie and Chris Cormier. Sound editing by Matt McKenzie. Production assistance by Sherry Cormier. Music by John Yasut and Daniel Carlton. See you at the next escape.